Hello and welcome to your month ahead forecast for the month of May 2015. An active month for Mercury this month. Mercury makes a lot of aspects, especially at the beginning of the month, along with the Sun, and then retrogrades. When Mercury retrogrades, it's about reflecting, going back over old ground. And especially in this particular case, it's all related to the process of evolution. So I'd like to start off this particular forecast talking a little bit about evolution and the concept of how, for some of us, we want progress, we want growth, and we want things to happen now in a very quick rate. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? Does it always happen that way? No, it doesn't. That's the case too. When it doesn't happen that way, do you have the right to, try to work for that evolution and that change and that growth? Most definitely, and you obviously should. If you like for it moving slowly, is there anything wrong with that? Well, depends on who you ask, but for people that are moving at the same pace as you, then, obviously not. Right? Some of us need to take things slowly. Some of us need to grow slowly and to go over the ground that we're covering, review it several times before we actually move forward, right? Like I said before, is there anything wrong with that? Well, no, that's just the pace that those people need to work at, right? Do you have the right to try to slow down processes when they're moving too quickly? Well, yes, obviously, because you might need to integrate things more slowly. But I can think you can see what's going on when we have people who want things to move quickly and people who want things to move slowly. We have a clash. We have friction. We have tension. And all of that is also ultimately part of the evolutionary process. And we can see a lot of tension going on in the world around us. It's reflected in socio-political situations, which are a very good compass for understanding the way things are moving energetically. We can also see it going on geographically with Earth changes. Well, the Earth is pushing for movement and growth in a manner that's quicker than some humans want to evolve. And so here we have this whole concept of friction, release, wanting to move fast, wanting to move slow, and so it goes because we live in a world of duality, right? And we start the month off with some very tense aspects, right? Between Mercury and Saturn, and also one which I discuss in the week ahead forecast, the most recent week ahead forecast, between Saturn and Uranus. And we're going to take a look at some of these aspects, the personal meaning of them, what's going on briefly on the socio-political scale. And we're going to do that all by looking at these through the astrological software, which I use to point some of these things out. As I said, it's a very busy month for our dear friend Mercury. He starts off the month by entering Gemini, which is his own sign. He functions very comfortably there, but within a couple of days after that, he ends up opposing Saturn. Very tense energy between Mercury on one hand and Saturn in Sagittarius in the other. Mercury is in the nakshatra or lunar mansion of Rohini, which itself is associated with the concept of growth and also evolution, creating something new on the heels of something that has been. Okay, and Saturn down here in Anuradha is dealing with the recognition of a potential of something that could come into being. But because of the position, especially during this aspect of Saturn, well, there's a feeling of being held back. So here we have the concept of balanced growth that could happen and a need to take a look at a situation in a fair and balanced manner. in order to be just to all parties involved. So we, can look at that on the socio-political scale. We can also look at that within each of our lives. We want what is fair. Within this situation that's been going on in Baltimore, people are wanting justice, right? They're wanting evolution. They're wanting growth. And this is not just something that's going on between, black and white and going on between policemen and people in lower class neighborhoods. This is actually a class thing that's going on, and it's a very deep thing. People are feeling as if they've been repressed for too long, and they're looking for movement, and they're looking for evolution. I think within that particular situation, within the first days of May, you're going to find out that some information comes out, all in Mercury and Rohini style, that is a step in the appropriate direction as per the judgment of the people who want justice in that particular manner, but it doesn't feel quite like it's enough. It doesn't feel quite like it's as much as was hoped for. Maybe even initially it might seem like it's something that was hoped for, but further down the line it ends up kind of fizzling out and not being quite as deep as one might have hoped for. That's the energy of the Mercury and Saturn opposition. And if we move forward a day or so to the 4th, what we've got going on is some very powerful energy that's building as we're building to a full moon in Scorpio. The full moon in Scorpio is going to be in the nakshatra of Vishaka. And Vishaka has some very interesting energy that's connected to it, because there are these things within Vedic philosophy that are called the gunas, and they compose all of creation. And they are basically energetic forces, right? One is called rajasic, and that's the energy of movement, right? The other is called tamasic, which can be looked at as the energy of resistance, and the other is called sattvic energy, and that's the energy that's balanced. All three of these forces are at play within Vishaka, and they're all interacting with each other. Now, due to this being a Scorpio full moon, plus several other factors, well, there's a revelation that's connected with it, right? And with that revelation, it's difficult to know which direction things should move in. And there's a desire perhaps to reflect over past ground, as the sun will be in a section of Taurus that's called Bharani, which relates to shifting on to a new level. But first, what is likely to happen is a review of some of the things that have come before in relation to that. And this all happens in coordination with a very tense aspect on the same day that becomes exact between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn is very resistant energy. It's slow-moving planet. It doesn't want things to happen quickly. So when we were talking at the onset about energy that moves too slowly, in some manners that's very Saturnian energy. Then you've got revolutionary Uranus that wants things to happen and things to be overturned in order to create something that's different, right? Uranus is in Revati, which can be understood as being very similar to something called the cosmic womb, right? Something is germinating. Very revolutionary forces are at play, and something new is wanting to be created. But Saturn is applying some resistance, and that Saturnian resistance is tied in with very repressive energy, right? So again, there's this concept of information coming out, but perhaps that information, even though it seems like it's a step in the right direction, does not necessarily fully fulfill the desires of people who want things to be swifter moving. It's still restrictive. It's still not heading in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction, but seemingly to those involved, it's not enough. On the personal level, you're likely going to be feeling some similar things. There's some growth, there's some movement, perhaps where you're looking for movement, but it's not enough, and the revolutionary forces that are at play within you may make you desire to take some appropriate steps to make things happen a little more quickly, because that's ultimately what you're going to be desiring. On the same day, a tense aspect going on between the Sun, pardon me, and Jupiter. Jupiter in Leo and Ashleisha. Jupiter going deeply into recognizing the potential for expansion in a particular area. But the Sun is still not fully ready for that movement. It doesn't feel like all the necessary process has happened that enables it to give birth to something new and shed its life-giving rays upon the situation. It's still looking back on what has been and still feeling a sense of loyalty or attachment to something that has been in the past and is not fully ready to move on, and is creating some tension in those particular areas, right? Then on the 7th, as we shift on to the 7th, what we've got is Venus shifting into, just bear with me while I move my cosmic calendar forward a little bit here. Venus on the 7th, I actually moved forward to the 8th in order to show you this, but it does happen on the 7th. Venus will enter Cancer. And Venus is going to be in the nakshatra of Ardra when it moves into Cancer. Now, Venus in Cancer, Venus has a very healing presence, right? And where there has been insecurity on the personal scale, and where there has perhaps been insecurity and global unrest on the massive scale, well, there's a healing energy that comes into play that really can help with the particular situation. But we need to maintain awareness. Ardra Nakshatra always teaches the concept of staying fully aware, because with Ardra, the tendency is to become so intensively focused that we don't keep our awareness on the little things, the smaller details that are going on, right? If I wanted to draw an analogy, since we've been briefly on this topic, if I wanted to draw an analogy to things that are going on in terms of global unrest, well, it can seem like there is progress in a certain direction, but if we get caught up in that progress, we may miss some of the things that aren't happening, right? And that's a necessary thing to look at too. Shifting on to the 9th, a tense aspect that goes on. Let me just move my cosmic calendar forward again. Between Mercury, still in Rohini, and Neptune in Pisces, and in Purva Bhadrapada within Pisces, I should say. Again, Mercury in Rohini connected with a process of seeing how things can grow forward. A very Sagittarian tone to the energy being carried into this particular aspect. So there's the potential to see where things could head. And there is also inspiration that's connected with this, because when we're dealing with Purva Bhadrapada, we're dealing with the process of inspiration, something which comes from an unknown quadrant and comes in and actually becomes concrete. Well, there's a need to look at the details. We've got a tense aspect between these two planets. There's a need to look at the details rather than feeling like everything is just moving forward in your life ultimately like you would want it to. It's important to fine-tune the details, I should say. I meant to say check, but fine-tuning also fits. Fine-tuning the details that are coming up, checking the details, making sure that things are really as you want them to be. There is some give and take involved in this particular aspect, right? There's the potential for progress that's involved, but there's a need to really look at things clearly, because with Neptunian processes, things can always be not quite as they appear. So an inspiring development, and by no means should you repress that inspiration, but you should check the information on an even deeper level and look through the details, because you may find that some adjustments have to be made along the way. Shifting on more towards the middle of the month, I should mention, as all of this is going on, this tense angle between Saturn and Uranus is still very applicable. This is called a Sesquiquadrate. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. And it's a very tense aspect. It's usually called a minor aspect, but it's minor because it's only applicable for a short period of time in most cases. But when it's involving two outer planets that move slowly, it can go on for a couple of weeks, and it's still happening at the time of all these other aspects. So there's still the feeling of repression and an uncertainty as to which direction things are going. A dialogue is happening as per mercurial processes, whatever this relates to in your life. I'm not even going to touch on the global and socio-political things. I'm just going to talk the aspects from here on out. But a dialogue is happening, but still things are not feeling quite like they are as we would like for them to be. So moving forward to the 12th, what do we have happen? We have Mars. I should move it forward another notch there, because it happens later on in the day. Mars makes a shift into Gemini. And a few days later, Mars will make an aspect to Saturn. But let's talk about Mars when it first enters Gemini. Mercury previously and now Mars Mercury had previously been transiting Kritika Nakshatra before May began, and Mars is still transiting it at that point. Kritika is very purifying energy. I find quite often, especially as the Sun will be in Kritika at that point, there are very deep realizations. Truth comes to the surface. And I should also mention that we're looking, and I actually missed this aspect, so we'll kind of backtrack over it. The Sun and Pluto, earlier in the week on the 6th, form an exact trine with each other, right? So needing to get down to the reality of a particular subject, even if we don't like that reality, a revelation of truth. There's always a revelation that happens with Sun-Pluto trines. Truth rises to the surface. The Sun sheds light. Pluto likes to dig beneath the surface. And Pluto's in Purva Ashadha. There's going to be, in relation to this aspect, which again, backtracking a bit, it happens on the 6th, there's going to be probably some uncovering of information that makes someone who is in a particular position of power seem somewhat smaller than they might be bolstering themselves up to be. Whatever that deals with on your personal level, whatever it deals with on the global level, we won't even go into that. But information is revealed. Now back to our friend Mars. Now basically Mars is transiting that same nakshatra, Kritika nakshatra, right? So information surfacing. And then Mars will be shifting into Rohini nakshatra, where Mercury is, on the 15th. And Mars will be forming, let's just go forward one more day, bear with me, please. Mars will be forming the same tense alignment with Saturn. So Mars in Rohini, again, looking at that forward motion in any dialogue that's going on at this point, because Mars is in Gemini, there's going to be a level of friction within that. And we've still got that Saturnian energy, which is saying, well, sure, maybe that's a step in the right direction, but it's still not enough. We still need a little bit more. You need a little bit more development in your life. You need more growth. You need more evolution. Any dialogue that's going on at this point, it may feel a bit tense. And there's a need to go into that tension so that results can be brought to the situation. But truth comes to light, balance can be found, but it may not still feel like it's quite as much as you would like. And we have to look at the fact that Mars is very passionate energy that wants movement, and Saturn is very slow-moving energy. And this Saturn-Uranus aspect has eased and is no longer applicable. But, you know, we're likely still to be feeling the results of what has transpired with that. On the 16th, Venus in Cancer forms a harmonious angle with Neptune. Okay? So again, through effort that's put forward in a particular direction, there can be the potential for movement, but a need to let energy gather its force before shifting forward. I'm just going to move my calendar another day ahead, because Venus will be in Punarvasu Nakshatra, where energy tends to gather. So a solution, a possible solution developing to whatever this represents for you, right? And it's inspiring because we're still dealing with Neptune in Purva Bhadrapada. But again, it's very detail-oriented, and a need to reflect over whether this is appropriate, whether it's enough, and in your personal life, should you be satisfied with it if it doesn't feel quite like it's enough? Well, maybe you shouldn't be satisfied with it. Should you accept it? Yes, because it's a step in the right direction. And it's important to accept that forward motion when it's there rather than just push it back and say no completely, right? So we want that progress, but we want more progress dependent upon who we are. Some people like slow development, but hey, that's what we were talking about initially. A few days later, and this will already be taking place probably on the 18th, you'll begin to sense Mercury slowing down, because on the 19th, Mercury is going to shift to retrograde motion. And Mercury will be in retrograde motion, in Rohini Nakshatra. Okay? So again, going back over the potential for growth, going back over what has developed so far. And it's going to be doing that for the remainder of the month of May. On the 21st, we've got the Sun also entering Gemini. So as I was saying, it's a very mercurial month because there are several planets that are going to be transiting through Gemini. Dialogue, flexibility. Where there is not the movement that you perhaps want, it's helpful to be flexible in order to assist with the development, right? And the Sun, as it enters Gemini, will still be in Kritika. So further revelations, anything that develops within, pardon me, I just can't help myself, anything that develops within this particular Baltimore situation, I think it's going to be continual in layers. So if there's a quick development, it seems at the beginning of the month, well, you may find out that it's not really the full picture and more information comes out and comes to light. At the same time that this is going on, we've got a tense angle between Jupiter and also Pluto. This is called a quincunx. Jupiter in Ashadha. Recognizing by going deeply into a situation, whatever that situation represents for you, going deeply into the feelings of a situation, going into the dark places that are connected with it, going into your feelings connected with it, well, there's the recognition for potential expansion. But something that comes to the surface at that time is not going to help that process to move forward as quickly as as you might like for it to. It's the way the universe wants things to move because that's the way things are developing, and that's important to understand, but it may not be on the level that you particularly want it to be, right? So needing to really get to the very bottom of the situation before that development and that potential can really be nourished through Jupiter. There's the tension that's there between Jupiter and Pluto. And this occurs a day before, or actually as I'm looking at this, yeah, it does happen a day before, but we're looking at it at the time that it's exact. You've got Venus and Pluto opposing each other. Now, this Jupiter, Venus, Pluto energy is all very interconnected. I'm not going to go into detail in terms of why that is the case, right? But again, there's very deep feelings, invigoration connected with information that surfaces that perhaps stops a development and is perhaps even an eye-opening revelation that is going to help to heal the process further, but it may first take you deeper into some tension. Because as I was discussing at the outset, you know, sometimes we need to, and if I didn't discuss this, pardon me, I'll discuss it now. sometimes we need to work through layer upon layer of things. Things don't always happen at the pace that we might like for them to, because there are several different layers that we have to go through in terms of creating progress in our lives, in terms of evolving spiritually, right? And this is, again, the surfacing of another layer through this Venus-Pluto opposition. And shifting forward also on the 23rd, I'm going to, basically we've got several different aspects going on roughly at the same time. The Sun will be opposing Saturn. Again, we've got that energy of feeling like it's not enough. We can see how things can shift, how they can move forward, because the Sun, actually the Sun at that time will be in Kritika at the time that it's making that aspect. We can see some justice coming to the surface in terms of the personal. It's just the concept of getting to the heart of what seems fair and balanced in terms of the progress, right? But still feeling like it's not quite enough, not quite feeling like what you want it to be personally, okay? At the same time, you're going to have a very profound aspect going on. These two planets, Pluto and Uranus, as you may know if you follow astrology, over the course of the last several years had been forming a tense angle with each other. And they finally moved on from their tense angle that's known as a square. But it's still applicable. They're separating, but it's still in effect. They're not going to apply again exactly, but it's still kind of lingering. And what's going to happen when we reach the 25th is Venus is going to cross the plane of that aspect. It's going to create something that's called a T-square. Venus in Punarvasu. Let's talk about Punarvasu a little bit. Punarvasu is symbolized by a house, a place of rest, a place of gathering together energy. Punarvasu also means a return of the goods, a return of that is good, or a return of that which is righteous. So restoring balance in your life, healing a particular situation, right? And there's some tension that's resulting with that, because still Uranus in Revati is very revolutionary energy, and something is germinating, the seeds of future growth. And when those seeds germinate, they have to press up against the surface, don't they, right? And there's that resistance that's there. That was really kind of symbolized through the Uranus-Saturn thing. But there's also this Pluto-Uranus square, which is still going on in deeper and deeper revelations, information surfacing on the global scale that's happening. In terms of your life, you're going through layer upon layer of recognizing who you are. On the global scale, we're going through layer upon layer of recognizing who we are as a species, recognizing our potential, but also recognizing how far we have to grow before we can really fulfill our potential. And this is happening on the individual level for you as well. And Venus begins to cross this plane of this aspect, and it becomes possible to see a solution for whatever is causing the problem in your life, dependent upon where these aspects are falling. We'll touch more on that level a little bit later on. But a potential solution becomes obvious. And basically on the 25th, we have Venus squaring off against Uranus. A few days earlier, we had the Venus-Pluto opposition. So it's basically applicable between the 22nd and the 25th in terms of the intensity of this particular alignment. Then following on the tail end of that, on the 26th, Mars in Rohini is also squaring off against Neptune. Now, Mars is kind of like the younger brother of Pluto. Let's put it this way. Mars is going to have a no-holds-barred approach. He wants action. He's always wanting action. Okay? In Rohini, he's looking for that forward progress. He's looking for that evolution, because if you remember again, Rohini is about growing. It's about evolution. It's very creative energy, right? But with Mars there, that's very passionate energy, and there's a tense dissatisfaction that's connected with it. And Neptune still doesn't have all the details right. Neptune is going to be in this particular area of Purva Bhadrapada that's creating that need to sort through the details for quite some time. Purva Bhadrapada is very inspiring energy. When it's being set off by Mars, it can create a lot of anger. And that's something that needs to be understood, because Purva Bhadrapada's purpose is to elevate. It elevates things. So anger can be elevated at that point too. So again, over the course of this month, there's this recurring theme of growth and evolution, but things are not happening quickly enough. This Mars-Saturn opposition is still very much in effect at this time. And Mars, by the time we reach the 27th, I'm still looking at the 22nd here, but why don't I move it forward a little bit? And just bear with me. I like covering all these aspects in fullness, so so pardon if this is going on to be lengthy, but it's important to understand all the subtle nuances connected with this. Mars and Mercury are going to conjunct each other, right? That's very penetrating insight. Likely something, a recognition within through reflection that perhaps makes you feel very passionate about wanting a particular outcome from a situation, right? But feeling, again, somewhat restrained, because Mars and Mercury will be in a different sector of Rohini at that time that's a little more Saturnian influenced and creating restriction at the time that they're doing that. So there can be, even though there's a very deep insight and a penetrating insight that's there, there's also the potential to feel a need to express anger. But as Mercury is retrograde, it's very difficult to express that anger in a creative way. It would likely come out in a more destructive way. So it's better to reflect upon any feelings of passion that may surface in relation to that particular situation. Honor any anger that may surface at that time, but think very deeply before speaking your mind in relation to that. Looking ahead to the last few aspects of the month on the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st. We've got Mercury on the 29th, again, squaring off against Neptune. Going back over old ground of what might be possible, where things might be able to head, but very much a need to reflect over the details, a need to look at the fine print in relation to a particular situation, right? In order for an agreement or a contract to be made, if there's any contracts going on in your life or any agreements that are happening, a need to really look at the details before moving forward, because Mercury, when retrograde, is always about the process of reflection and the process of intuition. And Neptune is in Purva Bhadrapada, which again, there can be the desire, is there is a inspiring development that has been going on for quite a while in relation to these particular aspects. There can be the tendency to miss the fine print. There's very much a need to go over the fine print in association with these particular aspects. On the 30th, I know it's not showing here. I'll inch forward to the 30th so we can look at it from that angle. We've got the Sun and Mercury conjuncting each other. Now, ordinarily, when the Sun conjuncts Mercury, Mercury tends to get disrupted. But when Mercury is retrograde, this does not happen. Mercury still has his brightness and isn't disrupted by the Sun. So there is an insight, there is potential, albeit it may still not feel like, for lack of a better way to put it, the full thing that you're looking for, right? But there is another development. There is an insight that comes through reflection. It comes through an intuition or just a hunch, so to speak, that does allow another opportunity or another potential or another possible solution. So this is going back over that old ground, and it actually brings something to the surface. But again, you need to look at those fine details, because what do we have going on at the same time as the sun is there? The sun is also squaring Neptune. So a lot of Neptunian energy too, right? And the sun, when the sun and Neptune come into contact with each other like this, it's very much a clearing of the fog. So again, go back over those details, even though you might not like the details, because as they say, the devil's in the details. Well, that's very much the case, because as you go over those details, you may find that something isn't as fully possible as you might like for it to be. So I know it can be frustrating on the personal scale, because things are not developing quite as quickly as you might like for them to, but there is development. On the socio-political scale, yes, again, it's suggesting for those who want radical change and transformation, there are developments, but it's not happening quickly enough for people to feel satisfied. So we're still going to see unrest in the world. We're still going to see the need for those who dare to speak truth to power to do so. And it's interesting, if I may close with this, how there are people who are not afraid to speak truth to power, but there are very few in power who are not afraid to speak the truth. It's just food for thought for a moment, right? So people are not afraid to speak truth to power, but those in power are very much afraid to speak the truth. And on the socio-political scale, that's what we've got going on, is it's about the truth and the truth coming to the surface. On the personal scale, it's about the truth coming to the surface for you. So don't fear that truth. The truth, very much in many situations in astrology, is represented by Pluto, right? And Pluto can be looked at as the Reaper, and he can be called the Grim Reaper if you want to look at him in a grim manner. But if you don't fear the truth, well, then that Grim Reaper, his mask changes, and he actually becomes somewhat cooperative. So, not to quote a cheesy song from the 70s, well, I shouldn't call it a cheesy song. I actually like that song from the 70s. Hey, why not, But don't fear the Reaper, because that mask actually will change at that moment that you look at it. Face the truth on the personal level. We all need to face the truth on the global level, right? That's the only way growth and development is going to happen. Now, obviously, this is just a look at the general aspects for the month ahead. I can't, through this, know exactly where this is going to affect your chart personally. In order to do that, I would need to take a look at your full astrological chart as shown from your date and time of birth. I do offer that service. I offer a vast range of astrological services through my website, person-to-person consultations, which are done using this exact tool that I'm using right now to record this. Personalized video reports, which are recorded as a monologue and not as a dialogue as the person-to-person consultations are. And I also offer written reports for those of you who like the written word over the spoken word. And also, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube page yet, there in the bottom right-hand corner of this video, there is a subscribe button if you want to subscribe so that you can receive regular updates. In terms of the astrological services page, there should be a link in this video. If you've closed it down, there's a link further down on my YouTube page, or on the page of this video, I should say, in the description area. That's going to do it for your look ahead for May. Until next month, well, there's weekly videos and there's daily videos, what can I say? But until next month for the monthly video, do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.